We have election results from last night, which you've already seen. What does this mean for the GOP? What does this mean for Trump? I'll tell you in a second. All the candidates are now taking shots at Elizabeth Warren. Is this going to be her battle of the Little Bighorn? Finally, there's a new campaign ad out, and it is very significant, but not for the reason you would probably think. I'm smarter than you, so I'll tell you why. All that's coming up right now on I'm Right. Oh boy, we had election results last night, and let me tell you something, folks. This means great things for Trump. Or, hold on, let me change that. This means bad things for Trump. Or none of that's true. You know what that is? That's lazy punditry, people. That's a lazy political hack going on TV, going up to his computer and typing out that everything has to be about Trump all the time. How does this relate to Trump? Trump is doomed. Trump is the best. Trump. If you can't do any political analysis of any election at all without mentioning President Donald Trump's name, you suck. Find a new job. It's pathetic. I woke up this morning to article after article. I'm looking at David Frum. I'm looking at Politico. I'm looking at all these articles that this means doom for Trump. The Kentucky governor lost. That's obviously Trump's fault. Trump, this is the end. Trump. Every candidate in every race tells its own story. It's not always about the man at the top. In fact, very rarely is it the man at the top. Sure, you can have somebody like Barack Obama pass a very unpopular law, which Obamacare was at the time, and that'll wipe out a lot of the members that were right on the fringe in the House. That's why they lost so many seats. Or you have, the Republicans lost so many seats in the midterm this year. A lot of that is, well, that's the way it goes. The party of the president loses seats in his first midterm. They lost about the average amount. Everything is not an indictment of Trump. Let's focus on Kentucky because we had Kentucky races last night. Kentucky Governor Bevin lost. Well, kind of lost. Says he didn't lose. He's challenging it. Now we have to have a recall. We'll see how all that works. They're citing voter irregularities and all that. And look, maybe there were, maybe there weren't. I'm not going to sit here and say something stupid like, no illegal people vote. There are no illegal votes in the United States of America. That would be idiotic because we've caught people. We've caught several people committing election fraud. But I'm also not going to take out the tinfoil and make myself a nice little hat and tell you fake votes are changing elections. He would have won if it wasn't for all these fake votes out there. That stuff gets a little bit conspiracy theorist for me. Let's just slow down. If you want to challenge the election, fine. You want to have your recall, fine. You want to recount, that's fine. Do your thing. I'm a little bit out on Democrats and Republicans claiming every single close election loss was because of voter fraud. Somebody cheated. It was the Russians. It was the Mexicans. It was probably just a close election that you lost. But it's not all bad news for Kentucky. There were 6 statewide races in Kentucky last night, and the GOP won 5 out of 6 of them. One of them, Mr. Dan Cameron, sorry, I don't know the guy's name, an attorney general. Apparently he's the first or maybe only black attorney general they've had there in 70-some years. It's a pretty cool thing. The guy has a great reputation, so good for him. Donald Trump took to Twitter, as he normally does this morning, and went off about it. He said, won 5 out of 6 elections in Kentucky, including 5 great candidates that I spoke for and introduced last night. Matt Bevin picked up at least 15 points in the last days, but perhaps not enough. Fake news will blame Trump. Winning in Mississippi governor race. And in fact, we did win the Mississippi governor race. By we, I mean the GOP. And in a way, I take credit for any good thing that happens out there in the same way that Donald Trump does. But look, he took some credit for the wins. That's fine. Look, he can move, but I promised you some actual analysis. Each race tells its own tale, especially when the guy at the top is not on the ballot. Everything is not an indictment of Barack Obama. Everything is not an indictment of Donald Trump. That is not how it works. And this is why. You see, Oftentimes, and far too often, and pay attention to this because this is going to matter, when you get an elected president, most likely elected twice because most presidents are elected twice, they serve 2 terms, that's just the general rule. What will happen is the party will then lose, the party that was in power will then lose following that president's 2 terms. Now, why does that happen? You can make a lot of arguments for it. Well, the pendulum swings. The country was ready for a change. Not always the case. Here's what happens. It happened with the Democrats, and if we're not careful, it will happen with Republicans. What happened with Barack Obama? Let's start there. Let's rewind to the beginning. Well, this extremely inexperienced, extremely radical left-wing state senator, relatively unexperienced, yes, he was a U.S. senator at the time, but he was there long enough for a cup of coffee, gets elected to the Senate, decides he's going to throw his hat in the ring and run for U.S. president. What? Who is this? Nobody's ever heard of this guy. Well, turns out he caught lightning in a bottle. Yes, people focus on the historic aspects of it because he's black, but the truth of the matter is Barack Obama, love him or hate him, and I can't stand him, but Barack Obama has charisma dripping from his pores. The guy gives a great speech, he inspires people, he packs stadiums, he slaughters Hillary Clinton, who is probably the worst candidate of any kind in U.S. history, walks into the presidency. Boom. Well, then what happened? Well, he served 8 years like most of them do, but his party kept losing seats, couldn't figure things out. Why are we losing seats? I don't understand. But Barack Obama came here and he campaigned for candidate X. Barack Obama came here and campaigned for... How could this guy lose? And Barack Obama... There's only one Barack Obama if you're a Democrat, and that kind of charisma that wins elections is not transferable. It doesn't go magically from one candidate to the next. You don't get to stand on stage and have Barack Obama introduce you as a Democrat, and all of a sudden, magically, the Barack Obama fairy dust just rains down on you, and now you're a great candidate. It does not work that way in the minds of voters. So what happened? Well, the Democrat Party spent 8 years getting lazy and convincing themselves that the platform, that what Barack Obama stood for, was the reason for Barack Obama's wins. You see, they didn't credit the man himself. Well, Barack Obama's just the guy. Yeah, he's fine, but the truth of the matter is, Barack Obama being there, that means the American people are ready for radical leftism. Do you think it's an accident why the Democrat Party is magically all of a sudden so hard left? They're campaigning openly on socialist ideas in their primary. Do you think that's an accident? No. They're still suffering from the Barack Obama hangover that convinced them that his 8 years in office meant that the country is far left and they're ready for this and Medicare for all and America sucks. No, that might have worked for Barack Obama. That does not work for Elizabeth Warren. It doesn't work that way. And the GOP runs the risk of doing the exact same thing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump ran on a lot of things. I would argue the main things you got from Donald Trump were in your face, back to the media. He's not going to take any of their crap. Tough on immigration. More of a America First nationalist push than a globalist push. It's undeniable. That's what Donald Trump is. And what will happen now, you will see this, the GOP at the end of Trump's term, which will most likely be 2024, they'll look around and start convincing themselves, you know what? That's what the country's all about. You know what they want us to do? They want us to go up to the podium now and tell the media where to stick it. I'm going to go up there and you know what? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go up there and do just what Trump, I'm going to go tell them to F off. I'll use a cuss word. And they'll try it and it'll be super cringeworthy and it won't work. And then the next guy will try it and it won't work. And then the next guy will try it and it won't work. Well, why is that not work? You know what? Maybe it was immigration then. Maybe it was immigration. Okay. So the next guy will go up to the podium and you know what he'll say? You know what I want? I want machine gun nests on the border. We'll just mow them down on the way up here. And everyone will be like, ooh, that doesn't work. And he'll get slaughtered too. People convince themselves that it is not the man himself people elect, but that it's his platform. It's his stance on the issues. People who vote based on the issues are people who all already know who they're voting for. Elections are not won by me. I mean, everything else is decided by me, but elections are not won by me. Elections are won and lost, especially national elections, by undecided swing voters who can go either way. And most of the time, those people do not vote on a platform. They don't vote on stick it to the media. They don't vote on immigration. They vote for the man himself. What do the Kentucky race results mean for last night? What does it mean for Trump? Not a daggone thing. Trump wasn't on the ballot. 5 of 6 Republicans won. Their governor, from what I understand, is not well thought of in the state of Kentucky. He lost in a close one. Supposedly he was down heavily, came back, almost won the thing on election night. Every single election is not somehow an indication of where the country's going and as it relates to Trump or the GOP. Each candidate has its own strengths, has their own weaknesses. Candidates run great races. Candidates run terrible races. Candidates spend their money well. Candidates spend their money poorly. Candidates raise a bunch of money. Some candidates can't raise money at all. And then they get crushed on the television set. We'll get to that a little bit later. Either way, my best advice for you, take every single pundit who made yesterday's races in Kentucky, all about Trump, and ignore them. That's not a serious person who's interested in serious analysis. That is a person who's only interested in the quick, easy clicks that talking about Donald Trump will get somebody. Go to other places for your political analysis. Mainly, just listen to me. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right. Coming up next, Raheem Kassam is going to drop some serious wisdom on us. Hang on. Well, sometimes you have to go to an outsider to get some new perspective on elections. So now we decided to go, well, kind of across the pond, even though he's kind of here right now, and talk to, I don't know, am I supposed to call you a Brit or an Englishman? We're talking to the War Room Impeachment Podcast's Raheem Kassam. What are you, Raheem? A Brit? Is that what I'm supposed to call you people?
Well, I'm a Brit, but Brits can also be from Wales and Scotland. So I'm from England, so that makes me an Englishman, but I'm also from London, so I'm a Londoner also. So take your pick.
Okay. You know what? We're going with Englishman. I like that. It has a more old school feel to it. I feel like you should have, a sword or something in that apartment by that Union Jack behind you. But anyway, that's another story.
Kentucky. Yeah, and a Sting song playing in the background wherever I walk.
Yes, of course. Kentucky and Mississippi and all these elections last night. I wake up this morning and I see the same political hackery that I see all the time. It's an indictment of Trump. It shows how great Trump is. Trump this, Trump that. Doesn't every race tell its own story? I mean, yes, there are national trends to the right or to the left, and frankly, international trends to the right or to the left. But is this somehow an indictment of Trump or an endorsement of Trump, what happened in Kentucky?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you look at across Kentucky, and especially if you look at more local races in Kentucky, you actually saw good news for Republicans almost across the board there. The one, obviously, standout one being Matt Bevin. But Matt Bevin has been unpopular in the state for a very long time, so this was always going to be a massive uphill battle for him. It also shows the power of Trump, actually. I mean, 15 points down this guy was about a month or two ago. And ever since Trump got involved with this, you've seen a shift back towards Bevin. And the fact that it's run so close as to be too close to call for the Associated Press. And as Matt Bevin didn't want to necessarily concede in the immediate aftermath of this, you actually saw a big Trump bounce, I think, in the last 24 hours. But the other one being, obviously, Virginia that we saw shift dramatically last night, according at least to CNN and the New York Times. The reality of it is that Virginia has been becoming more and more blue over time. That has been a trend over time. And so this, as far as Virginians were concerned, and as far as election experts were concerned, was not a surprise at all. So for these guys on television, be they Jake Tapper or whomever, to sort of try and portray this as a massive loss for Trump, I think is a good thing as far as Trump is concerned, because it means that they have their expectations high for their nominee next year, probably Andrew Yang at this point. I don't know.
What, by the way, because I'm not from Kentucky, nothing against the state, what do they have against Bevin? What did Bevin do? Pass a big tax increase or something? Is there some scandal there? Why is he so unpopular in a relatively red state?
There were all sorts of things, as I'm led to believe, and I'm not a Kentucky expert by any stretch of the imagination, but just sort of digging my hands into this race over the last couple of weeks to try and understand it. There are all sorts of things that Bevin had done, tax issues. Trump even called him, I think, annoying as hell during his rally the other night. And I think a lot of Kentuckians felt that way and didn't quite get that Trump was actually trying to pay him a backhanded compliment. He said he was annoying as hell because he's fighting so hard for Kentucky that he never leaves me alone. But Bevin, just a generally unpopular figure because of, I don't know, several issues over the last couple of years. And, you know, one might ask the question, why then did the Republican Party throw in its lot with Bevin? Well, because I don't think anybody presumed that by this point in time you'd have such hysteria going on at a national level as regards impeachment. And I think that hurt Bevin as well.
Virginia. Now, can I make the argument, Raheem, that I had already written it off anyway, that urban D.C. sprawl has turned Northern Virginia into the People's Republic of Virginia, and now it's not getting better. D.C. Democrats continue to flee D.C. itself. They move into Northern Virginia, and they've turned that state permanently blue. Now, I hate that, because I actually love the state of Virginia. It's beautiful, foundation of liberty and all that other stuff. But I had already written Virginia off. Why am I supposed to care about this? Virginia's lost and it's not coming back, or is it?
Well, up until last night, I still wanted the Commonwealth of Virginia back under Her Majesty's rule, but you can keep it as far as I'm concerned now. Look, it has been obviously trending that way, and metropolitan sprawls never really seem to go backwards, only further and further out, and that's what we've been seeing in Virginia. You're right, of course, to say. I mean, here's the thing: if you know Northern Virginia, if you know the DC sort of suburbs, I suppose they are now, you'll know that there are some very pretty areas like the Old Town in Alexandria. But everywhere you go in these places now, you see in the windows these big posters, these rainbow flags. No place for hate, immigrants welcome, all of this stuff. The place is now, basically a sanctuary state for liberals. And anybody who thought that a Virginia defeat last night was a major upset for the GOP, yes, in the long term, of course, that means that policies in the long term have been so incorrect as to shift all these liberals there and turn it into a liberal state. But in terms of just what's happened over the last year or so, 2 years, maybe 3 years of this administration, not really, not a surprise at all. And it's happening in Texas too, I hear.
Don't blaspheme. Don't start blaspheming my state, okay? They've been threatening that for years, that Texas is going to turn blue and that all is lost. I've seen no evidence of that. Why should I be worried about that? Greg Abbott just won by like 16 points last election.
Yeah, but how is Austin doing? And what are the politics of these liberal cities in the state?
Okay, that's fair. That's fair, but I would argue...
Are they shrinking, Jesse? Are they shrinking?
They're not shrinking. Look, there's something to be said for, you see these bumper stickers all over the place, "Don't California my Texas." The problem, I would argue, is not the urban areas themselves, because all urban areas are Democrat. I mean, name a major urban area that's Republican. It's just not something that exists. It lends itself to Democrat, live on the government dole policies. The problem, the potential doom for states like Texas is people are fleeing states like California, where they've ruined their own economy with their crappy Democrat politicians, and they're coming here for our great economy, and that's what'll ruin it. It's not Austin. Austin's always sucked. Austin's always been crazy.
California has the greatest concentration of climate change activists probably anywhere in the world, and it's also the state with one of the greatest problems as regards climate issues, wildfires and so on and so forth. And it's through mismanagement of things like that, and it's why a lot of these Californians are leaving. But they are the Democrat policies, left-wing policies that have stopped A lot of things that would stop that happening in their state, a lot of the climate issues happening in their state, are what's making them move to places like Texas. And if they're not moving to Texas, they're moving to Virginia.
Well, they can have Virginia. I say we just cordon them all off there. Look, I'm the one who wants the United States of America to get an amicable divorce anyway. Let's just decide to go our separate ways. But that's another matter. We don't have to go into this now. I want to go into a little bit your War Room Impeachment podcast. A lot of people are not sure what this means or what it is, but you and I had a long conversation about this on the radio the other night, not to brag or anything like that. And it's fascinating to me what this podcast is about. Explain it.
You bragging about a radio show or bragging about having a long conversation with me?
The radio show. I would never brag about that, Raheem.
Oh,
anyway,
I see.
go on.
Yeah. Well, people trade off my name, you see. Well, Jesse, we came to this about 2 weeks ago and saw that there was a real lack of pushback, real fact-finding as went the whole impeachment process, and not just what the Democrats are doing in the skiff, and not just the stuff that you can hear on Fox News every night, but how this process started in the first place. Tracking it back to what happened in Ukraine with the overthrow of the government back in 2013, which was an EU, NATO, and Obama administration sponsored policy. How that then led to people like Joe Biden trying to leverage his status as the vice president to enrich his family, enrich his son. There are plenty of other politicians, by the way, who are doing the same. Joe Biden just happens to be the most high-profile one, and obviously standing in an election next year. And so we not just track all that, but we go through and we have a staff of people now who go through all of these 500-page transcripts. We pull out very important information. We condense all of that information into a one-hour show. We have great guests. We've had in the last week Matt Gaetz, Mark Meadows. We've had Scott Rasmussen, the pollster, David Rivkin, who wrote an amazing op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about the unconstitutionality of all of this, and proved how historically, even if you do buy the whole quid pro quo line, how historically presidents have often not just done that, but also used non-governmental plenipotentiaries, in this case Rudy Giuliani, to assist their foreign policy efforts. So it's a show that is meaty. There's very little opinionizing on it. We try and stick to the facts and let listeners make up their own minds. And you can find it at warroom.org.
warroom.org. I would highly recommend all my viewers check it out. I do not do that often with my guests, but I have personally found it to be quite fascinating. Raheem Kassam, host of the War Room Impeachment Podcast. Appreciate you joining me tonight, Englishman.
Thank you very much, Texan.
Coming right up, all the candidates are starting to take pot shots at Elizabeth Warren. As usual, I'll give you the broader perspective on it and tell you why. Hang on. Elizabeth Warren, she is now apparently a target, has a big old target on her back for people to shoot arrows at her. Joe Biden came right out, didn't name her, of course, because it's politics. He said, the other day I was accused by one of my opponents of running in the wrong primary. Pretty amazing. It's representative of an elitism that working and middle-class people do not share. We know best and you know nothing. If you were only as smart as I am, you would agree with me. Well, Joe Biden was not alone in this. Pete Buttigieg, I'm never going to get that right, okay? Just deal with it. I went to community college. Mayor Pete, we'll call him on this show. He took a shot pretty blatantly at Elizabeth Warren. Here it is.
Mayor Buttigieg, you say Senator Warren has been, quote, evasive about how she's going to pay for Medicare for all. What's your response?
Well, we heard it tonight. A yes or no question that didn't get a yes or no answer. Look, this is why people here in the Midwest are so frustrated with Washington in general and Capitol Hill in particular. Your signature, Senator, is to have a plan for everything, except this. No plan has been laid out to explain how a multi-trillion-dollar hole in this Medicare for All plan that Senator Warren is putting forward is supposed to get filled in.
Of course, that was a few weeks ago. Since then, she did roll out her plan to pay for it, and it's terrifying. We all remember the $52 billion $52 trillion Elizabeth Warren Medicare for All plan that will essentially wipe out life as we know it on planet Earth. Now, why is this happening? You're going to see an uptick in this a lot lately. Why? Well, we have poll numbers, and Elizabeth Warren is pulling ahead of Joe Biden. And the fact that Joe Biden is going after her when he's done that, I'm going to take the high road thing the whole time, tells you he knows he's in serious trouble. Pete Buttigieg, he knows. Kamala Harris, she knows too. They all know. Elizabeth Warren getting a bunch of shots taken at her right now means that she is the new frontrunner and the clear favorite to win the Democrat primary. What does that mean? Why should you care? Here's what it means. Elizabeth Warren is actually probably to the left of Barack Obama. Elizabeth Warren is a radical candidate, has virtually no chance. Now, I don't want to dismiss her offhand. That's a good way to get beaten at the polls. But Elizabeth Warren is not somebody who is going to go inspire voters in the Rust Belt to flip their vote from Donald Trump, especially when those voters are all back to work, and vote for Elizabeth Warren. But it does show you a significant shift in the Democrat Party and what their party has become. Now, I'm not going to be one of these guys that'll put rose-colored glasses on history and, say, John F. Kennedy, he was the same as Ronald Reagan. The Democrat Party used to be to the right. That's not true. They've always been to the left, but nothing like this. Nothing what we're seeing right now. How could this be? Well, I'll tell you what, pause. We'll come back to that because I want to combine it with another story because, hey, I'm a professional. There's a candidate last night, a Miss Julie Briskman. She won just a local election. It's not something you should concern yourself with. It doesn't matter. I think it was Board of Supervisors. I don't know. I don't do research for the show. Now, if the name Julie Briskman rings any bells, it's because that's the lovely young lady you see right there who she worked for a government contractor. Trump cruised by on a motorcade, and Julie Briskman, as a grown adult, as you can see, decided to give the Trump motorcade the bird. Now, setting aside the embarrassing, harpy, obnoxious immaturity of doing something like that, I mean, even if you hated Donald Trump's guts, I mean, look, I couldn't stand Barack Obama, but I have kids. This is a mother of two, by the way. I have kids. Don't make an idiot of yourself. Look at yourself. That's embarrassing. How could anybody, a 52-year-old woman, how could anybody do that and then go home and look in the mirror that night and think to themselves, man, I got him. Oof. But it's indicative. This is what the Democrat Party has become. Elizabeth Warren is in the lead, people. She is now solidly in the lead, at least according to what the other candidates believe. Miss Julie Briskman is now an elected official. What were her qualifications? She gave Trump the finger. Ha ha ha, got him. Resist. That's what the Democrat Party has become. No platform, no message. They've become the radical protester who stands on the corner and waves stupid signs around and screams at people. You know the old animal rights protesters who used to go throw blood or spray paint on anybody who wore a fur coat? Those people, they're today's United States senators. They're today's Board of Supervisors. That's what the Democrat Party has become. And on a bigger level, what it's going to do is it's going to make things very, very, very difficult for the Democrat Party to win national elections. If you step back and look at the things Elizabeth Warren stands for, the things she talks about, these are insane. These things, even in liberal states, Massachusetts, New York, you would have a hard time selling some of these things. Pete Buttigieg is not exactly a card-carrying conservative, and even he's up there on the stage like, wait, what? Medicare for all? You can't do that. But that's what the party has become, radical activists who don't stand for anything but the most left-wing crap we can throw against the wall, and screw Trump. But the problem is, if you're trying to win a national election, that's not a platform. Remember, Rust Belt swing voters win presidential elections. The election will not be decided by me. I'm sorry to admit this, it will not be decided by you. The guy who's sitting in Wisconsin who voted for Barack Obama twice and then went out and voted for Donald Trump last election, yes, I don't get it either. People are strange. That's the guy who wins elections. And the thing is, that guy's back to work now. That guy likely has multiple job offers now. And even if he wasn't somebody who was out of work, he knows somebody who was, and they're back to work. Now, what you're saying is Elizabeth Warren is going to knock on that guy's door. I do my own sound effects, no big deal. She's going to knock on that guy's door and convince him to switch his vote back from Trump for a $52 trillion Medicare for all package? That's not going to happen. Barring a major scandal or a huge economic recession or something like that, there's no way the American people were going to go for that. But the Democrat Party is lost. And I'll go clear back to what I told you in the opening of the show. A lot of this is because of Barack Obama. I'm not blaming him, I'm blaming the party. They thought Barack Obama's 8 years meant that America's left wing now, baby. Let's just pour the socialism on. People love it here. That's not what it was. Barack Obama's charisma carried him to 2 terms as a president, not his radical socialist policies. Until the Democrat Party figures that out, they're going to be lost in the wilderness. And keep in mind, remember what I said. Let us, as right-wingers, let us not make that mistake when Donald Trump is all gone. Let us not look around and be like, you know what? The American people clearly buy every part of the Trump message. No, they bought Donald Trump. That does not mean they buy you or the next guy. To talk about this and other things, we bring in Human Events' own Will Chamberlain. Hang on. Welcome back to my show. Now, joining me is publisher of Human Events, Will Chamberlain. Will, before we get going on some election night stuff from last night and making fun of Elizabeth Warren, what is this new proposal from Kamala Harris we were just talking about? What does she want to do with schools?
Well, she wants to make a mandatory school day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. because I think she wants to juice the truancy stats, right? I think she probably hasn't arrested enough children today, or maybe in the last week. She's just out of practice. So I don't have any other explanation for this silly policy.
What is her justification for it? Is this single moms shouldn't have to pay for daycare thing? Is that what this is?
Right. It's something like saying because daycare exists. I mean, I could see free daycare. I could at least understand that. But making every single child stay in school from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is just abusive. School's terrible and children shouldn't have to go. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit aggressive, but just generally not a fan of elementary school.
Look, I'm with you. I proposed this morning that what we need is an actual counter proposal where every child only has to go to school for 1 hour a day for the next year, and that hour is dedicated to clearing out all the desks and chairs so we can then demo all the buildings and eliminate government education. But that's another matter entirely. Let us go back to Kentucky last night.
Right.
I wake up this morning and I see all this, what I consider to be extremely lazy and stupid political analysis of this is great for Trump, this is terrible for Trump, it's about Trump, Trump this, Trump that. I have always believed, especially in these off-year elections, candidates decide their own races. Each race tells its own story. Kentucky had an unpopular governor. He lost barely. Everyone else won. What's the big deal? Why am I supposed to care?
I don't really know. I don't think there's much to learn from the election other than Matt Bevin was a pretty terrible candidate. It seems pretty obvious that if you're losing an election, you're the one Republican who loses in 14 statewide races, then maybe you're not very good at what you do and should, return to private life. I guess that's the biggest lesson, that Matt Bevin should return to private life. Clearly, this politics thing is not his area of expertise.
Virginia's gone forever, isn't it, Will? I mean, look, I look at this D.C. sprawl. Obviously, D.C. is one of, if not the most expensive places to live in the entire United States of America. So all the socialists flee the socialist city where they live in and move out to the D.C. suburbs of Virginia, where they then carpet bomb that area with their horrible policies and make that expensive, and the sprawl continues. I love the state of Virginia just for the history of it. I mean, we're talking Washington and Jefferson and so many great things, but it's gone now, right? It's never coming back.
Right, like absent some very creative policy thinking, I think Virginia would be gone. But I've got a few ideas. We could relocate the State Department to Rhode Island. That would be one way to sort of reduce the Democratic concentration of Virginia. Another idea would be to kind of go back to what the founders intended and return Arlington to the District of Columbia, where it no longer gets senators or representatives. Given that Arlington is just like 90% Democrat, I don't really see an obvious reason why they should have representation in Congress if the rest of the district doesn't. As a district resident, I firmly believe that I should not be represented in Congress, and I just think that that lack of representation should be extended across the Potomac.
Your State Department thing, I want you to expand on that, because I've actually always had this theory where I think the State Department should be scattered to the winds. And I'm not saying eliminate the State Department. State Department actually has a role. I don't see why there should be one centralized State Department anyway. There's a million different parts to it, a million different aspects of it. They deal with a million different countries. Why do I want all the commie bureaucrats in one building to conspire against the president?
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen the wonderful demoralization of certain government bureaucrats at the news that their departments were moving to Missouri and Indiana. And I'm all for demoralizing government bureaucrats. Like I read an article today in CNN that said that it was apparently tragic that Mike Pompeo had demoralized State Department employees. And I just thought, well, that's just a good start. Why don't we demoralize them some more and send them someplace far, far away from Washington, D.C.? Why not just
I love
keep
this.
demoralizing them?
Let's add firing to demoralizing, and then I'll be really cheering. Honestly, people put these things out there, Will, and look, I know we joke around a lot, you and I, but it is serious to me. When I hear things like this Alexander Vindman guy give a testimony that this violates U.S. foreign policy, as if they're the ones who set the foreign policy and not the president. And then I see headlines just like the one you mentioned. I saw it too. State Department employees are demoralized. These people will legitimately think that they are in charge. They think they are a separate but equal branch, if not superior branch, and then everything else is just window dressing. That's a scary mentality for unaccountable bureaucrats.
Right, and it needs to be corrected. I mean, that's the way to view the whole impeachment saga, is the State Department rebelling against a president who they don't like, who they think is wrong in foreign policy. But the problem is that's the Constitution works a pretty specific way. The president is elected and he gets to determine the course of the nation's affairs when it comes to foreign policy. So if they don't like it, too bad. Their job is to execute on the president's foreign policy and not try and thwart him. I mean, when you read Vindman's testimony, it's clear he thought that he, along with his fellow bureaucrats, were right and Trump was wrong, and that if Trump tried to thwart the bureaucrats, that somehow Trump was doing something illegal, when in reality it's the reverse.
Will, I have a theory, it's an amazing theory, that Barack Obama was elected twice off of his charisma, gave a great speech, same way Donald Trump's elected, off his charisma, so on and so forth, that Barack Obama being elected twice convinced the Democrat Party that the country was way left of where it actually was. The Democrat Party looked at Barack Obama and said, they're clearly ready for socialism, and they didn't realize it was the man himself who got elected. And I think that is why we see, Elizabeth Warren is now the leader in the primary. That is, her positions are unheard of. Even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you would never see a major national Democrat take some of these positions. Am I wrong in saying that he doomed his party, maybe not even by his own fault? His leftism doomed his own party because they looked and thought, well, it wasn't the man, it was the country's just ready for it.
I mean, maybe it's another problem, and another way to look at it is that Barack Obama is too moderate for today's Democratic Party. I mean, he went out on television the other day talking about how cancel culture was bad, and got shellacked by the socialists. And then you can compare, there was a very good ad by the GOP Senate, by the Republican Senate majority, that compared Obama's rhetoric to Bernie Sanders and the rest of the modern Democrats' rhetoric. And it's completely different. I think a contributing factor is overconfidence about the fact that Obama won twice. I think another contributing factor is Twitter and the ability of activists to bully politicians into taking a very, very hard left position unless they want to get mobbed and look unpopular on Twitter. So unless the Democrats can really solve that dynamic, because I think the Republicans, the beauty of where the Republicans are is that the base seems to pull them in a more populist direction, one that's ultimately more popular with the working class voters that are 2/3 of their base and kind of away from the donor class. Whereas on the Democratic side, you get this pull towards like crazy woke SJW socialism that the vast majority of the middle of the country just looks at and thinks is nuts.
Will Chamberlain, publisher of Human Events, I appreciate you joining me, my friend.
Absolutely, anytime.
Coming up next, we have that ad that Will was just talking about. We're going to play you the ad in its entirety and then take a step back, and I'll tell you why it actually means a lot for the next election. Hang on. Look, I understand that I have a burden. As somebody who is a genius, you come to me for wisdom, and I get that. So I'm about to drop some on you right now. We are about to play you an ad. This ad was put out by the NRSC. That's the National Republican Senate Committee. Essentially, all the U.S. senators, the Republican senators, get together and they pool their money. They raise money for the NRSC, and the NRSC will get involved in races, various Senate races across the country. They'll pick this guy who might be vulnerable or this guy who might be vulnerable, and they take all those resources and they'll dive into the race and do a bunch of ads telling everybody, you know, his opponent's Satan and he's an angel. It's standard political stuff. The Democrats have their own version of this as well. So does the House. There's a Republican version of this in the House, a Democrat version of this in the House. Now, I'm going to play you this ad. I want you to look at the ad. And yes, it's a wonderful ad, but I want you to pay special attention to how well the ad was done. And then I'm going to explain something to you. Go.
The Democrats do have a legitimate shot at flipping the upper chamber in 2020. I think the majority is very much up for grabs. I guess I'd probably rather be the Democrats right now than the Republicans.
Control of the Senate is absolutely in play. Candidates are pulling the Democratic Party to the left on healthcare, immigration, taxes, climate.
They've tacked left on a number of issues because, as you say, the party is moving that way.
There was a jerk left last night.
New taxes, new regulations, government health care.
I support Senator Sanders' Medicare for All bill.
I'm signing on to Medicare for All.
I'm with Bernie on Medicare for All.
Medicare for All would outlaw most private health insurance in this country.
If you like your private health insurance plan, you can keep your plan, period.
Should we outlaw private health insurance?
For people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
That's what Medicare for All is all about.
You will not see your taxes go up.
Will you raise taxes for the middle class?
Yes, they will pay more in taxes.
First thing I do is going to repeal this Trump tax cut.
Green New Deal aims to provide, quote, economic security for all who are unwilling to work. That sounds like outright socialism.
Yes, I want a 70% tax rate on the low. Yes, I want to wrap my arms around socialism.
There's a new Gallup poll showing that Democrats have given up on capitalism.
Would you call yourself a proud capitalist? Oh, I don't know.
All the Democrat candidates have embraced radical ideas.
Whatever we do, we'll end up supporting the nominee. I'm not going to run away from that.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi announcing a formal impeachment inquiry.
We're going to go in there. We're going to impeach the
Democrats will stop at nothing.
The Democratic Party has been pushed to the point of really wanting to upset the whole system.
Get rid of the Electoral College.
We need to fix the Supreme Court. I think they stole a Supreme Court seat.
This is a war on the Constitution. This is a war on the rule of law.
We will transform this country.
Wants America to look more like Scandinavia.
That's right. And what's wrong with that?
This is not a radical idea.
Are you guys ready for a radical idea?
What else stands in the way of the left's quest for power? How about the Senate? Control of the Senate is absolutely in play.
Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia.
Ben Sass, Nebraska.
Dan Sullivan, Alaska.
Mike Round, South Dakota.
Joni Ernst, Iowa.
Tom Cotton, Arkansas.
Bill Cassidy, Louisiana.
Corey Gardner, Colorado.
Steve Daines, Montana.
Tom Tillis, North Carolina. David Perdue, Georgia.
Hold on, we're not done yet.
We will win because we must win. We must hold the line.
That was Hollywood quality. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat. I know we have a bunch of Democrat watchers too. Doesn't matter whether you hated every word of it. That's not the point. The quality of the ad. Now, why am I talking about this? Why does any of this matter at all? People ask me all the time, and you'll have people say all the time, money, get money out of politics. Why does money matter in politics? Money doesn't even matter. You don't need matter. You don't need money. It's just this is what money does in politics. You see, since Trump has been elected, the National Senate Republicans, the National House Republicans, the RNC itself, and the Trump campaign have been flush with cash. Every time there's a major media assault on the administration, people throw money at the problem. And how does that end up? It ends up with you hire really, really, really sharp people at the NRSC, sometimes people straight out of Hollywood, to put together ads like that. That's why money matters in politics. And let me explain something. The Democrat Party nationally is broke. They're not getting the donations. Things are drying up. People are frustrated. Their base, it's a bunch of Antifa losers without any money to give anyway. It matters a lot. Pay close attention in 2020 to fundraising numbers. Don't listen to anybody who ever tells you money doesn't matter at all. Money allows the NRSC to churn out Steven Spielberg quality commercials, and that's not going to be the last one. Every Senate office, congressional office, national Republican office is getting packed with more and more talented people who go to the place that will pay them. Money matters a lot, people. It's what gives you ads like that. It's the reason all of Donald Trump's ads look so good. Well, you're welcome for today's show. I know I was particularly brilliant tonight. We'll be back to do it again tomorrow. See you then.